First things first, Thomas, the Caribbean Memorandum of Agreement. 7 years after serious attempts first began at regional CBI harmonization, 4 Caribbean countries have finally produced a tangible accord on pricing. Why were they finally now, so many years later, able to find common ground? What's changed? Was it the consistent external pressure?
That had something to do with this. Really, we have not been very good at arriving at these positions on our own. Too often, external pressures have led us to this place. And unfortunately, this is what happened in this particular case. As you've alluded, there have been attempts in the past to arrive at a common position, but those never really got to any form of agreement.
There were attempts.
There were
CEPA,
attempts.
and then it was
There
sort
was
of
CEPA.
sidetracked by hurricanes.
Precisely,
Right?
yes. And there were conversations between prime ministers before, but it never led to what we are now, an actual memorandum of agreement that we can seek to implement.
So is it fair to say that outside pressures sort of impressed upon the Caribbean leaders the gravity of the situation?
Yes, and the urgency of the situation. Right. I mean, none of us want to lose visa-free access to the UK or the Schengen area, right? Not just for these programs, but more importantly for our own citizens who live in the countries, for their own freedom of movement and mobility.
I want to get a sense of how committed Grenada is to the MOA, together with the other 3 Caribbean CBI countries. Are you really going to raise the minimum donation to 200,000 by June 30th? It was a bit confusing because the wording in the MOA says that you'll be putting a price floor on the investments, but are we to understand that it also includes the donation option, raising that to 200,000?
Yes, the understanding is that the minimum price across options will be $200,000. And Grenada signed on because we are really serious about implementing the aspects of the agreement, including price. And so we have started the process to be ready for implementation by June 30th, as agreed by our Prime Minister. We've begun the conversation and we've begun the work for the legislative changes that are required in terms of the regulation relating to pricing. But also we've begun the work related to having the regulatory body put in place, as well as determining and agreeing to the minimum due diligence standards. So we'll be ready to go by early June for implementation for the 30th of June. The hope is that the other countries who have signed on will be in a similar position and will be able to together implement all of the changes we have agreed on.
And to the extent that you are privy or aware, is that preparatory work also proceeding apace in the other signatory countries?
I've had conversations with Antigua and Dominica, and my understanding is that in those places, they have begun the work. As a matter of fact, Charmaine and I are urging our colleagues to meet under the CIPA umbrella to iron out the technical aspects of this
So a revival
agreement.
of CEPA.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
understood. Of course, St. Lucia is conspicuous by its absence from the Accords. Is the agreement with Galaxy, that they have with Galaxy for this new infrastructure project, is that primarily what's preventing St. Lucia from joining the MOA, or are there other reasons? What signals have you been getting from your counterparts in St. Lucia?
Well, I have no information regarding why St. Lucia determined that this was not a good time to sign, other than what their Deputy Prime Minister said last week, that they have some legal obligations that they have to consider before they can sign on. But no other information, unfortunately.
Understood. And the European Union, they look set to make the operation of a CBI program in itself sufficient grounds for suspending the visa waiver agreement with CBI countries. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about the conversations that are taking place between the Caribbean CBI countries and the EU in this regard?
So I think It was in January, I believe. We all descended upon Dominica to meet with European Commission, to be more precise, representatives. And my personal takeaway is that we had some good deliberations, some good conversations, and they themselves made some suggestions as to how we could reduce their anxiety regarding their national security. And also the UK has been through the countries in February and in March, traveling through each island and having discussions with government and unit agency representatives. I think those discussions have been quite fruitful. Again, they too have made some suggestions as to how we could allay their fears. And this is part of this whole MOA and some of the changes that I talked about earlier regarding our switch to investment migration agency and some of the elements we intend to add as an agency, for example, residency requirement as part of the CBI program.
And is it your impression that the European Union is engaging in those conversations in good faith? Because I know that some observers have intimated that maybe the European Union has already made up its mind. It doesn't like citizenship by investment, and that sort of no matter what the Caribbean countries do to demonstrate that it has robust due diligence, even if it raises prices to a price point more palatable to the European Union, that maybe none of this will actually help. What's your impression on that?
My impression is that from the people that I interacted with at the sessions, I found them to be earnestly trying to find common ground for us to agree on in terms of minimum standards, right? Also, it's my impression that this is election season for the European Commission. And so that's a driver, a really important driver. Many of the smaller parties that earn their keep on this immigration issue are pressing the Commission to do something about it. And this is a low-hanging fruit, right? In that it's a very popular program. These are very popular programs. It has the feel of the rich getting privilege that the poor do not have. And so it's easy to address this one and say we are doing something about the immigration issue, but not really affecting it in any significant way. That's the impression I got.
So if you had to guess, do you think that once the Caribbean, let's say you get St. Lucia on board as well, and let's say you have this information sharing, joint due diligence, you raise the price level across the board, do you think that that will be enough to assuage European concerns?
I think that in tandem with ETIAS as it relates to Europe and ETA as it relates to UK. I think when those two programs are implemented, I think it will ease some of the fears, because the overarching issue that is shared with us is that we are allowing individuals to bypass the visa process for these countries, right? But with the ETIAS and the ETA, it gives them an opportunity to look at these people before they actually travel to the country. So my belief and my hope is that once these programs are implemented fully, that will allay some of the fears of the Europeans as well as the British.
Yeah, I would imagine that after that has been implemented fully, there really should be no legitimate cause for concern among the Europeans. And so if they still at that point have concerns, then we might say they're not operating in good faith.
Yes, and it would be clear that it's reasons other than national security.
Yeah. Let's talk about Grenada, the program that you had. The CIP has just had its best year in history in terms of application volume and investment. In fact, the program has been on an uninterrupted tear, an upward trajectory since 2016. Now for 2022 and for the first quarter of 2023, the record application volume was a direct function. You haven't made any secret about that. It was a direct function of Grenada's remaining open to Russian applicants, where your competitors in the Caribbean, of course, were closed. but Grenada banned Russians as part of the agreement with the US Treasury, the 6 CBI principles, more than a year ago. So what explains the continuation of the elevated application volume well into 2024?
Okay, so slight correction there. It's not, the volume hasn't increased beyond March 31st, 2023. What happened is at that date, we had registered about 2,000 applications, right? And so we continue to process those applications. But as it relates to new applications, we have not accepted any Russian or Belarusian applications. We just continue to process those that we accepted as of the 31st of March 2023. You will appreciate that to process that number of applications takes some time. I mean, prior to that, in 21, we processed 430 applications, I think. And then in 2022, we only processed 493 applications. In 2023, that number grew to 1,682, right? But you will agree, and that took a year. You will agree it will take some time to get through these applications. Our target is to complete the processing of all applications for 2023 by the end of June.
Oh, and you think that's realistic?
I think it's realistic. We've implemented some changes in our processing of the applications. I will reveal that I have engaged the services of someone at my level so that I am not the only person having applications go up to the committee. We'll now have two individuals doing that. Prior to that, I was doing maybe 50 applications a week on average. So I expect that number to grow to double, to about 100 applications a week.
So then let me ask you directly. So the sudden onset of this additional demand, of course, it's forced the CIU to become more productive on the processing front. And you have been. But nonetheless, by our count, your backlog of unprocessed applications stood at about 1,800 files at the end of 2023. What are you specifically doing to ensure timely processing, and have you been able to chip away at that backlog in the first quarter of this year? I know you've shared some broad numbers from Q1 2024. We haven't seen the detailed processing data. And a corollary to that question is, how long should people who apply today expect to wait for processing, realistically speaking?
So I'll answer your last question first.
Okay.
So we've created a two-track system. So we're processing the applications for 2024, not allowing them to go into that backlog line. So you will have applications, and we have had applications that have been adjudicated in 3 and 4 months for this year. So we've had some 2024 applications that have already been adjudicated, whilst we treat with the backlog in chronological order. Yeah. As it relates to the Q1 numbers for 2024, we've already processed 530 plus applications in the first quarter. That's more than we processed for the entire year of 2022. All right? Yeah. I really like to stress this because I think it shows an improvement in our efficiency. Right? Added to the 1,600 almost that we processed in 2023, that would make for more than 2,100 applications. As I said, the total number at the end of 23 was about 3,000, just over. So yes, your math is almost spot on. And in terms of how we're treating with that, as I said earlier, I've engaged a service of someone at my level. My senior due diligence officer also has the responsibility to analyze the applications as I would. So we're looking at getting 100 applications per week to the committee starting next week. So notwithstanding I'm here, the applications will continue to be processed.